What's going on, everybody? Cleebus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to take another look at the Google Pixel 6a about a year after my original review and go over whether or not it's still a good phone to buy at this point. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So overall, the Google Pixel 6a is more of an entry-level flagship phone. On one hand, it gives you more of the high-end kind of experience with a really high-quality camera, a faster processor, a nice-looking display, and a more premium design in general. But at the same time, the Pixel 6a, unlike something like the Pixel 6 Pro for example, is still meant to be more of an affordable device. Now, when it was first launched around July of 2022, at full price factory unlocked, it was going for around $599. So again, definitely compared to an absolute top-of-the-line device, it is quite a bit more affordable, but compared to your average budget phone, it definitely wasn't exactly cheap. That being said though, at this point in mid-2023, you can easily find this phone under $400, sometimes even under $300 depending on where you're getting it. So definitely keep this in mind throughout this video, because overall I feel like for what it is, this phone is actually giving us quite a bit of value for the money. Now with the Pixel 6a, we're getting a 6.1-inch OLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 429, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. So overall, definitely a nice display here. Really the only potential drawback, and this really depends on your preferences, is that at 6.1 inches, this is definitely not a very large display. I mean, I guess it could be depending on what you're coming from. If you're coming from a really old, maybe lower end phone that has like a 5-point-something inch display, then yeah, of course. The Pixel 6a is going to feel a bit larger, but I feel like at this point in 2023, the average smartphone is around 6.5 inches. So at 6.1 inches, the display we're getting with the Pixel 6a is quite a bit smaller. So on one hand, if you're someone who typically prefers a larger display, then of course, you will be a bit disappointed here, but on the other hand, I know a lot of people want a more compact device, which in this day and age, while it's not really rare per se, it's definitely a bit less common. So if you do want something a bit more compact, then having a 6.1 inch display here might be a good thing for you. Aside from the size and dimensions, we are getting really good image quality here. With an OLED display, the colors look nice and vibrant, the display itself is pretty bright, and the viewing angles are really good too. So if you're outside in the sun for example, or really in any kind of bright area, the phone is still going to be pretty easy to see. And of course, with a 1080p resolution, things are going to be nice and sharp and crisp. So if you're doing stuff like watching videos for example, where the image quality is a bit more important, this phone will be great for that too. Now for storage, with the Google Pixel 6a, we're getting 128GB of internal storage, but unfortunately there's no microSD card expansion here. Now, on one hand, I feel like for the average user, this is still going to be plenty of storage, and most people won't really have any issues, but at the same time, I do want to point out that at this point in 2023, it is pretty common to find really affordable phones, and I'm talking like super entry-level budget phones that have not only the same internal storage as this, but also microSD card expansion too. So again, on one hand, for most people, I feel like storage is really not going to be an issue here, but at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily call it impressive, and not having microSD card expansion is definitely a drawback. Because if, for example, maybe your phone right now does have microSD card expansion and you have a lot of information on it, transferring everything from a microSD card to a whole new phone's internal storage is probably not the most convenient thing to have to do, as opposed to just taking the microSD card out and putting it in your new phone. So in general, if that does bother you, then definitely keep in mind again, this phone does not have microSD card expansion, but if you're just an average user looking for a decent amount of storage, then I feel like this phone will still be perfectly fine. Now for security features, this phone unfortunately does not have Face Unlock, which considering it is more of a higher end device, that is kind of disappointing. I mean, I guess it makes sense if you look at like an iPhone for example. Those phones have no fingerprint scanner, but they do have Face Unlock, so having at least one is okay, I guess. But that being said, this phone does at least have a fingerprint scanner, so definitely nice. But let's give it a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues at all. Now for the camera setup, we get a nice looking hole punch design for the selfie camera. This camera is 8 megapixels. Then on the back, we get a dual camera with a 12.2 megapixel main camera and a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. So definitely a simple camera setup here, and on one hand you might be expecting like a quad camera setup or something, especially if you're coming from more of an entry level or mid-range device. But keep in mind, although the common mid-range phone typically also has a depth sensing camera and a macro camera, with the Pixel 6a, first of all, keep in mind this is a bit more of a premium device device, and as a result, the hardware in the camera is going to be a lot higher quality than, say, your typical $300 5G phone. So as a result, the depth sensing camera is really just built into the main camera. So portrait mode does work perfectly fine. And as for not having a macro camera, yeah, this can be a bit of a drawback, but in my experience, the zoom on this phone does work decently well. So I feel like for most people, the camera we're getting here is probably good enough to do pretty much everything you really need it to do. And in addition to this, the Pixel 6a can record 4K videos in the rear camera and then 1080p in the front. I don't know why the selfie videos are limited to 1080p in a phone like this, but with this phone, only the rear can record 4K. So if you're doing maybe like a vlog, for example, and you want to get that higher resolution, this might be a drawback. But I feel like for the average user, it's probably still at least going to be okay. Now to give you an idea of what the camera can do, here's some pictures taken with the Google Pixel 6a. So as you can see, definitely great photo quality here. And I feel like for the vast majority of people who are taking photos with a smartphone, this is probably going to be good enough for you. Now, of course, if you want to go all out and get something like the Pixel 7 Pro, then sure, the quality is going to be better than this, but obviously you're going to be spending quite a bit more money. So in general, if you want a good balance between a really high quality premium camera, but also something that's a bit more affordable, I do think the Google Pixel 6a will be a great choice. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, with the Google Pixel 6a, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Google Tensor processor. In general, the performance is great here. Definitely not the fastest phone out there. At this point, the phone is, what, a year and a half old, maybe a little bit less. So yeah, of course, at this point in 2023, there are much faster phones than this. But at the same time, keep in mind again, this phone is going for under $400. So compared to your average $400 mid-range phone, the performance you get with the Google Pixel 6a is quite a bit better. So if you're going to be on your phone a bit more, doing slightly more demanding activities like maybe higher performance mobile gaming or editing a video on a program like CapCut, for example, for that kind of use, the Pixel 6a will be a great choice. And in general, even if you're doing more basic activities, but you just want a faster phone overall, again, I do think this phone will be a great choice. Now I ran a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and then comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not this phone will be a performance upgrade for you, because depending on what you're coming from, it may or may not be. If you're coming from most mid-range devices, most likely this phone will be a pretty solid upgrade, but if you're coming from something like a Samsung Galaxy S10, for example, that's a higher end but older phone, it may or may not actually be a really big upgrade, maybe more of a lateral move. So again, definitely depends on your current device, but in general, if you're looking for something around the $300-400 price range and performance is more of a priority for you, then in general, the Pixel 6a will be a great choice and most people are really not going to be disappointed. For the battery, with the Google Pixel 6a, we're getting a 4,410 mAh battery that supports 18-watt fast charging. So we are getting a decent battery here, it's at least acceptable, but keep in mind, compared to most mid-range phones, which at this point in 2023 typically have 5,000 mAh batteries, the battery life we're getting with the Pixel 6a is definitely not the best. So if that is more of a priority for you, maybe you have to use your phone all day, but you're not really around a charger a lot, then in that case, you might want to get something else that has a better battery. But I feel like for regular use, especially if you're around a charger a decent amount, it will at least get the job done. And in my experience, while not having the best battery, it's definitely not terrible either. I mean, a 4,410 mAh battery is not really what I would call small. So again, on one hand, if you really want the best battery you can get for the money, then just be aware this is not it. But if you just want a decent battery to get through fairly normal use, then I do think it will still be okay. And also keep in mind, with the Pixel 6a, we're not getting wireless charging here, which is kind of unfortunate considering, again, this is more of an entry-level flagship phone, which I feel like most phones in this general category do have wireless charging. Like take the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, for example. That phone is comparable to this phone in pretty much every way, and it does have wireless charging, and I'm pretty sure the iPhone SE does too. And while wireless charging is probably not that important to most people, just keep in mind, if you are expecting it with this phone, you might be a little disappointed. For the software, the Google Pixel 6a does have Android 13, and in addition to this, you can also expect to get several other major updates in the future. I believe it will be getting Android 14, 15, and 16. So definitely quite a few updates. So if you want to keep your phone for multiple years, but you also want to make sure you have the latest software, then this phone will be a great choice for you. As far as other features go, the Pixel 6a does have NFC, which is not really surprising considering this is a higher end device. So if you like to use tap and pay, you'll be happy to know you can use it with this phone no problem. But one drawback here is that unfortunately, this phone does not have a headphone jack, which again is really not surprising considering this is more of a high end device. And honestly, flagship phones haven't had headphone jacks for years now. But at the same time, if you are expecting that feature, then just keep in mind, with this device, if you do want to use normal wired headphones, you will have to get an adapter. But in conclusion, my general thoughts about the Google Pixel 6a about a year after my original review. In general, just like when I first reviewed it, I do think the Pixel 6a is a great phone, and honestly at this point in 2023, I feel like it's even more worth buying now than it was before. The main reason here is because at this point, again, you can easily get this phone for under $400, and even at $599 for what it was, it did give us quite a bit of value for the money, but at $400 or even $300 or $200 if you get it like refurbished on a site like Swappa, the Pixel 6a is honestly a really good deal. With this phone, for the price of a really entry-level to mid-range phone, we're getting a nice premium looking display, much more premium materials with metal on the sides and glass on the back, really good build quality, a super fast processor, a great camera, features like NFC, and really good software support. So in general, if you're looking for a phone that really gives you a flagship level experience, all while still being reasonably affordable, I do think the Google Pixel 6a is definitely worth considering. Now once again, if you want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipus Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.